Next is the invocation by Michael Hanks from Ceres Pentecostal.
Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We thank you, Lord, for the citizens and the leaders that are here in this room. I pray, Lord, that you give each of them wisdom and direction tonight as we work together for the betterment of the city of Ceres. I pray that you bless this time, bless all that's said, bless each of those that are in attendance, and we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no presentations tonight. Citizen communication. While the City Council welcomes and encourages participation in City Council meetings, adopted rules allow no more than 5 minutes for expression of non-agenda items. Matters under the jurisdiction of the City Council and not on the posted agenda may be addressed by the general public. However, California law prohibits the City Council from taking action on any matter which is not on the posted agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the City Council. Citizens are entitled to address the City Council on any agenda item subject to the 5-minute provision. I don't see any speaker cards. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the City Council? Please step forward.
John Warren, City of Ceres. Today I noticed something when I came home from work. The car that my neighbor owns has been wrecked and sitting there in the street for some time. And one of the nice city and code enforcement or police department personnel came by and put a notice on the window that basically explains that the vehicle has to be moved. So I took the opportunity to go read that particular document, and I would like to read that one part of it to the council tonight because it is in direct conflict with the section of the city code that it is quoting. I don't know if that's the intent or how this came about, but that is my question for you folks. It says here, private property, and then the box is checked under public nuisances, the Ceres Municipal Code section 10.09.150. You have 10 days to comply. Failure to remove garage completely enclosed or covered with a fitted car cover will result in the removal of the nuisance at the property owner's expense. I have a copy here of that particular section.
And what was that section again? 09?
10.09.150.
Okay.
It's parking, storing unlawfully. The current code. I have a
Okay.
copy. There's nothing in the, to make a long story short, there's nothing in the current ordinance that would allow someone to put a car cover over their vehicle and park it in public view. For some reason, this notice was developed and the general public is being informed of something that is entirely incorrect and is not what our code says. My question is, how did this happen?
Mr. Wells, are you familiar with that?
It's the first I've heard of it, so if we can get the information, we'll look into it. We are discussing chapters 9 and 10 this evening as a public hearing. So the specific code section he's referencing is subject to consideration and change this evening as part of the public hearing. So
But what he's saying is
it's
that,
inconsistent. Yeah, obviously, first I've heard of it, so.
okay.
This notice was developed, it says here on the bottom of it, the last time it was revised, as all forms are in most government agencies, was revised in 15.
Again,
About
this
4 or
is the
5
first
years
time
ago.
hearing of the information. We'll, if you can provide a copy of it, we'll take a look and let the council know.
I have a copy on my phone, but I'm sure the
We have it.
agency has these, and my question is, who would have developed this form?
don't know the answer. This is the first I'm hearing of it. If you bring it to staff, we can research it, but you're bringing it to council, so we
Well,
take council direction.
As you know, it wasn't on the agenda, so we can't
Yes.
make an action on
Yeah,
it tonight.
I understand that, yes.
But if you want to leave us the copy, then we can make sure that we check into it, or tonight we'll be discussing that very section.
Well, I don't have a copy to leave with you, but I'm sure you can find one
Okay,
easily. Okay, thank you very much.
thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council tonight?
Gene Yakeley series. Recently had a nice conversation from Sergeant Coley. I think it went pretty well. I think it was Tuesday. I urge that any of the people in your districts, if they have issues, like you well know, I have some that are good and stupid and bad or whatever that I bring up. But if you have any in your own district, I urge you to tell those individuals to try to make an appointment with Sergeant Coley so they can go around, he can go around in conversation and tell the individuals that might be concerned about what goes on in the city and in code enforcement side, so they'll have a better aspect of what's going on. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeakley. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Seeing no one else, we'll move on to appointments to boards commission. There are none. Conflict of interest declaration. Is there anyone on the council that has a conflict with anything on the agenda tonight? Seeing none. Consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered routine in nature and will be enacted by a single motion unless otherwise requested by an individual council member or public for special consideration. Otherwise, the recommendation of staff will be accepted and acted upon by roll call vote. Is there anyone that would like to pull a consent item in the audience or on the council? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Move to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, AB, 6, 7, and 8.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Condit,
Aye.
Councilmember Durasett,
Yes.
Councilmember Klein,
Yes.
and Mayor Vieira. I apologize, Vice Mayor Rhino.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
There is no unfinished business. Public hearing. Public hearing to consider ordinance number 2019-1054, amending in their entirety the following titles of the Ceres Municipal Code: Title 6, Health and Sanitation; Title 8, Animals; Title 13, Water and Sewer. Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Rhino. As we continue on our journey, climbing the mountain, we are to the next step of the process, the adoption of 3 titles of the Municipal Code, Title 6, 8, and 13. So just a review of all the titles, 16 titles. We've completed 4. These 3 are the next to enter the near completion stage. As a reminder of the grouping. So this this evening is a combination of groups 1B and 3A. There's the current schedule. I'll get into that in a little more detail with the next items. We won't spend too much time on this one. So just a review of Title VI. Title VI initially was a discussion item back in August. It was broken up. Group 1 was broken into the first 4 titles, and those have already come through council and been adopted, are now in the process to be completion and be effective on January 1st. So Group 1B, Titles 6 and 8 were revisited and came back to council with a full council on October 28th. And the council provided direction primarily on the one discussion item relative to the wastewater storage. So in the package this evening, in the clean version of Title VI, is the revised language that we hope capture the direction from the council. So we can review that at your convenience. And then the 2 other changes was moving the weed abatement back to Title VI and moving the vacant boarded buildings back to Title VI as well. So if you want to go there or just keep going through, and there's not much to...
Well, I think that what do we do about the waste wheelers?
So the language is drafted and for your consideration for adoption.
Correct.
So if there's any change to that language, We can do that now. You can take the public hearing, we can go through each of the items, then open the public hearing, and then come back, and council can take direction. It's really at your direction.
Well, can we open the public hearing now, and then as we get to each section, we can just
Of course.
talk about it then?
Yep.
So we'll open the public hearing. And is there anyone on the council that has anything they'd like to discuss in Title VI, Health and Sanitation? Well, I do. I still have an issue with the waste wheelers. I don't believe they should be up against the house. I think they still should be out of sight. And I think by allowing them to stay out in public view, I think we're lowering what we expect of our citizens when so many people complain that Ceres is junky, Ceres looks whatever, but yet if we're stepping back if we say, well, let's just let them leave it out front, even if it is up against the house. What I can't understand is if someone has to take their waste wheeler up to their house to meet this new code, how much harder is it just to open the gate and put it behind the gate? I don't understand that, and I don't want to put Councilmember DeRosset on the hot seat, but you have said before
You know,
that-
I actually talked to a lot of people out there, and there's a couple roads in particular, gosh, what's the name? Peachwood? No, it's off Rose Avenue, where their doors, or their garage side doors aren't even big enough for the waste wheelers to go back there. I mean, if you take pride in your house, like I do, you're gonna put your waste wheeler in the back. Even though there's a spot that I could put it in to the side, you know, but it's almost like, man, we are completely, I don't wanna be that guy to completely come up with all these rules that everybody's gotta have, and that's not my job. At least I don't feel like that is, right?
Well, no, I would disagree. I do believe that's our job, that,
To tell a taxpayer, somebody that owns their house,
yes.
that if there's a place on the side of their house that they could put their garbage, that I'm telling them they gotta put it in the back of that.
Well, it's the same thing we do with our zoning ordinance. We tell people how big they can build their house, on what size of their lot. It's the same thing, we're doing that. So why shouldn't we expect the community aesthetics to be such that we don't have garbage cans in the front yard? Because garbage does not belong in your front yard.
It's not in the front yard, it's on the side of the house.
Well, no, it would be in the front of the house, up against the house. It's still visible to anyone that is driving by. It's still gonna be in the front of the house. It's not gonna be maybe in front of the garage, but it's going to be in front of their fence, which is in the front yard.
Do you think that, because I don't know if you drove around, but I actually did.
I
and,
drive around a lot, I'm
Sure, well,
retired.
there you go. I had prep period.
Okay.
It's, there's probably more than half of the people within our community, I'm throwing out half, it might be more, that have their stuff on the side.
And why do you think that is? Because we haven't been enforcing it. That is why it's that way. And so why don't
I
we?
think we've been enforcing it, but having two code enforcement officers is not gonna do that. I mean, I'm just, that's my opinion, that I truly don't think, what we're gonna do is we hired these code enforcement, or the one code enforcement
The
person,
extra one.
to do this waste wheeler thing, and that's all they're gonna be doing,
Well,
every single day.
And I would have to disagree, because I've talked to a previous code enforcement officer, and she said that she did get it under control, and how she did it was, she put the city into quadrants, and she attacked each quadrant, and then once people realize that we do have a code, we're going to expect you to abide by that code, they start stepping up. And I believe once they know the city is serious about it, that they will comply. Councilmember Klein?
Well, you know, both you are discussing the thing, and I reread the thing, and the language has been changed somewhat. So if you go to Title VI, page 4, 601030C, says waste wheelers and recyclable containers shall be placed in the street immediately adjacent to the curb for collection in accordance with section. All other times, the waste wheelers and recyclable containers shall be kept and maintained at a location upon the premises on the side yard of the house. Waste wheelers are not permitted to be stored in the driveway, in front of the garage, or in front of the house. So it's a combination of what we had discussed earlier. So when we discussed it earlier, they could be up against the house, they can be up against the garage. The language has been changed some where now it says it must be on the side yard. It cannot be in front of the house. Okay, it cannot be in front of the garage.
But where is the side yard? Is the side yard,
Is side of the house. If you look at the way they talk about the front of the house is from the curb to the front of the house. The side of the house is from the side to the side property yard. The back of the house is from the back of the house to the rear property line. So my interpretation of this is it's got to be on a side yard, not against the house. A side yard, it could be against the house, but it can't be against the garage, and it can't be in the driveway.
so it's going to be against the fence on the side yard,
Whether it's against the fence on the side yard, yes.
which is in the front yard?
But it states it cannot be in front of the house.
I know what in front of the house is, and I'm visualizing in the front of the house, and then everyone has most people have a side yard, and that's where people are going to put it, and it's going to be in what you were terming the front yard, but it's the side yard to people on the other side of their driveway, and it's in front of the fence. It's still in the front yard. It's just not directly in front of the house, as the pictures Mr. Wells had showed us before. Some people keep it right in front of their house, and this would preclude them from being able to do that. So maybe you can explain what the side of the house is, or the side yard.
We took the direction from council of what you provided direction. 3 council members indicated that was the language that we used to prohibit where you said you didn't want it in front of the house. In front of the house would be the structure.
Correct.
In front of the garage, the garage. So the idea is putting it on the side yard was the direction that the council gave.
When it says upon the premises on the side yard of the house,
Premises would be the lot, right? So
Okay.
the lot that you own,
okay,
and on the side of the house.
So my interpretation of that
So-
is if your fence is even with the front of your house,
yes,
okay, and extends out
yes.
to the property line, that is still considered the front of the house.
Well, I would.
That would be
The
my-
definition would be, if you extend the house straight out, that's going to be the front of the house. If it is adjacent to the house, that would be the side yard. So the side yard has a definition in the zoning code as to side yard setbacks, and that would be the intention of being stored in the side yard setbacks.
Which would be in the front yard,
It would be, well,
correct?
it's not in front of the house, but it
No, no,
could
no,
be
but
in
it's in
front
the
of,
front
could be the front of the
yard.
side of the fence.
It-
Again, it depends. Every lot's different. We've got 11,000 different homes. You could have a 5-yard setback. You could have a 10.
But isn't that going to create even more problems for code enforcement instead of either you have it's allowed in the front yard or it's not? So now it's going to be an interpretation by the general public that they're going to say, this is my side yard and it's okay to be there, but maybe it really isn't what you would consider to be the side yard.
Again, if the council would like to change the language, we're open to that. We took a crack at the language based on the council direction. From a definition and a practical application, in front of the house is pretty clear. If it is in front of the front-facing portion of the house, not allowed.
Councilmember Condit?
Sure. Thank you, Vice Mayor, and I appreciate your comments, and I happen to be in agreement with you as I have been in the past in this discussion. Might I just suggest maybe we could add the language out of sight, because I know that's at the end of the day what we're trying to achieve. I don't know if that would work, if it's on the side, out of sight. I know that in some instances, such as my house, if I were to put my waste wheeler on the side of my house, I do have a tree that would block the waste wheelers. Now, I don't do that. I'd take mine behind the fence, which I do think, which I would agree with you on, is reasonable. But I don't know if the language change, maybe we can include out of sight. I don't know if the council would be open to that.
Well, that about would take it back to what we had before,
If it's
correct?
out of sight, again, vision without being seen, that's what the previous language was. If you can't see it, that's why the language was so clear. You're exactly right. The previous language was absolutely crystal clear. If you can see it, it's in violation. If you can't, you're clear.
And to me, this isn't crystal clear, because I think
It's
people
not.
will.
The council gave direction. Basically, this is relaxed language to allow the latitude that 3 council members express the direction to do. That's what we provided language for.
Okay.
You know, it's, it'd be interesting to find out how many of those houses, and again, there's a few, 3 or 4 that we were looking at and talking with the gentleman that I went over his house. And would we be the ones responsible to fix the guy's fence and the other people's fence?
No.
If we made a change in regards to, you know, the waste wheelers have to go in the backyard?
It isn't a change, because we've had that in our ordinance for many, 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 many years.
Sure, but it wasn't enforced.
Well, it
has
was
been
enforced,
enforced.
and then it was
It has
stopped
been
being
enforced.
Well, I mean,
enforced.
it was enforced. I mean, I was cited or told that I couldn't have it in
It
front,
has
so I
been
put it in back.
enforced. We've written
Yeah, I know.
hundreds and hundreds of citations. We've sent out hundreds and hundreds of notices, courtesy notices. It has been enforced. There has been significant efforts. Can there be more done? Of course, but there's other priorities of code enforcement as well. But it has been enforced, and there is still a prevalent challenge within the community. Again, this is a policy decision. We look to the council to make a policy decision.
We saw the pictures of the garbage can with the garbage on top and the lids up like this in front of the house. That would be in violation. If the garbage can was in front of the car, from the pictures that we had seen and that you had shown us, if it was in front of the house, that would be in violation. If it was on side the house, again, going back to what Councilman McClain was talking about, if it was on the side, then that wouldn't be in violation. However, if it was full of garbage on the sign, on the side, it would be in violation. I think what we do is we see how this goes and maybe look at it for about 6 months or a year and just see how trashy, if people still
Well,
aren't taking pride in their houses, because I
we-
think a lot of people do.
We wouldn't be able to look at it for 6 months if we make it the change in the ordinance. So why don't we see if there's anyone in the audience that would like to? I mean, I think we know how we feel up here, but let's see if there's anyone in the audience that has any comment about waste wheelers in the front
Well,
side
I
yard.
think we've already done that, and I think the people that are here are the ones that are gonna say, I know Mr. Warren doesn't like it, no, the other gentleman doesn't like it, you know? No, I don't.
Mr. Wells, so if we take a vote and it's 2-2, what does that mean?
Well, the item in front of you this evening is the ordinance adopting Titles 6, 8, and 13.
Yes?
So if you took what we would recommend is to separate out 13 because that has urgency attached to it, and adopt 13 because that is critical for the timing relative to the changes for the collection and turnoffs. So we would just need to amend the ordinance, and this is a first reading and introduction, so we can make those changes. So if there was not a consensus for one of those titles, we would recommend continuing Title VI to another date.
And I would not agree to continue, because then what happens if I'm sick or someone else is sick and we just keep putting it off until we have the quorum that somebody wants?
Again, 13 has critical nature to it. 6 and 8 don't. You could table those to a discussion. We've got, 8 other titles to go over, and they would all need to be adoption. There's no pressing need for 6 and 8. 8 is pretty simple, but 6 could be not heard tonight and could just be put with the next group. We're going to talk about that. It could go with group 2.
So let's say that the majority of the council wants to do that. Does that mean every time that we're going to have a discussion on the code section update, that if we don't have a full quorum, that we're going to continue that section, because that would be the only fair thing to do?
Well, if we can't get 3 votes in favor of something, then it either dies for lack of approval and you go back to the old code, or you continue the item until you get a vote one way or the other.
Well, what would the council like to do?
3 of us already decided that we're gonna stick and keep it how it is right now.
Right, but there aren't 3 of you here, and how do you know the mayor hasn't changed his mind?
Put it off until he comes back. Call.
Unfortunately, you can't.
I know, it's Councilor McClain, have you changed your mind?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Maybe we can table 6 and vote on the other two.
Yep, that sounds good. But I would like to say that for any future council discussion or the updates, that if I happen to be sick and it's a critical vote, that I believe it needs to be moved out until I can come back. I mean, is that only fair?
It is, but when I say this again, and I guess, quote me if I'm wrong, we've already voted on that as a council, as a full council.
What was the
We've already
discussion
said-
item?
It was
So
a
you
Right,
gave
it was-
direction.
it was-
So
okay,
this
so-
evening was a public hearing
But the
scheduled for.
discussion was, and what Chris decided was, is that he felt the same way as Councilmember Klein and myself.
Right.
That he didn't think he should be telling exactly what, every resident should be doing.
But
So-
don't you think that people can also change their mind
Sure,
between what they said
absolutely,
before?
absolutely.
And so can you speak for him tonight, or do you want to just hold it off?
Hold it off.
Okay,
There you go.
there we go. So are you going to make that for a date certain?
Well, let's get, the item is one ordinance, so let's
Okay.
get through that, and then we can look to see how you're going to make a
All
motion.
right, so we're going to move on to Title 8.
Title 8, Animals. One quick correction. Councilmember Klein had sent some type edits this morning, and we did make one correction in Title 6. So on page 6, section 6.01.090, paragraph B, there was an extra little duplicated where it said shall become delinquent, and it said that twice. So we made that simple little edit. Thank you, Councilmember Klein. So depending on what you do with the rest of it, that edit will be made. That was the only other edit that we had in Title 6. So just wanted to make that noted for the record. And we move on to Title 8, Animals. Animals was relatively straightforward. As we discussed previously, the biggest question was relative to a prohibition on pit bulls. Council gave that direction. So this is relatively very close to the original language, defers largely to the county's ordinance relative to Stanislaus Animal Services Agency, and ready for any comments or considerations you may have.
Is there anyone on the council with any questions?
I got a couple.
Okay,
803010, not including significant number of dogs or miniature what's significant? What do you mean by significant? Is it like 6 at 2? Because then if you go to chapter 4, and it says your pets allowed are only 3 total, so that means 1 potbelly pig, 1 cat, and 1 dog, that's 3. Or it would be just 3 dogs or 3 cats or 3 potbelly pigs. So, I mean, I know individuals that have 3 dogs and 2 cats. So that's 5.
So I'm not following you what you were
I'm not
what you were
either.
referring.
Yeah, okay, so it's chapter 3, page 7. And it's 803010A. And about the third line down, it starts with dogs, cats, miniature potbelly pigs, and canaries, but not including a significant number
Sufficient.
of dogs.
Sufficient,
Okay,
not
sufficient.
significant,
So
sufficient.
what's sufficient?
So sufficient is triggering the need for a kennel, which is more than 3. So you're limited, so that section is a definition of household pets, and then what trips you into the next level is more than 3 dogs, which is the definition in the other section relative to a kennel. So if you have more than 3 dogs, you'd have to get a kennel permit.
Then if you go to the next page, okay. Oh, kennel permits. Okay, I misread that then. My apologies.
Do you have anything else on that
No,
section?
no.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to discuss Title 8 Animals?
Could we get more clarification between the kennel and the 3 dogs? Because some of these people
More than
have-
3 dogs is required to have a kennel license, period.
Okay, but some of these people have huge amounts of cats.
It's limited to 3 per the ordinance.
So the ordinance would include cats as 3.
Correct, 3 cats.
Okay, try getting them in the kennel. Okay, thanks.
So you're allowed to have 3 dogs and 3 cats?
As it's written currently.
Okay.
That was gonna be my question. If I have 3 dogs, 3 cats, 3 pot-belly pigs, I can have a total of 9 pets? Is that correct? How many pets? do
That's the
we
way
have?
I understand it without being a
Don't,
kennel.
as it's written right now, we do not have a limitation on the total number of pets. We just have a limitation per household pet.
Per household. We should have a limitation on the number of pets per household. Thank you.
But is that our existing code?
Our existing code does not have that limitation. Existing code has 3 dogs, 3 cats, and the other household pets, those definitions. We did expand that definition slightly, but
Would the
dogs, cats, miniature pot-bellied pigs, canaries.
Is there anyone on the council that would like to change the existing code? No?
I would be curious, so how would we enforce that? Are we going to be checking in on people with pets, or how do they have to license their pet with the city?
So under SASA, so we're members of Stanislaus Animal Services Agency. Under SASA, there's what they call canvassing, and that canvassing is the licensing effort, because there is the county code that we adopt is all household pets require a license. Primarily, the large 99% of that is dogs and cats. So the licensing for those 2 components is done through canvassing, where Animal Services goes out and does canvassing of the houses to verify whether they have. Most of the focus is on dogs, clearly, because that's the effort and the easiest animal to identify. But it is done through Animal Services.
There isn't a license for cats.
They're supposed to be.
I,
The dog license is obviously the primary vision, but the cats is next to impossible to really enforce.
okay.
I mean, when I'm sitting here looking at this thing, I mean, do we have any issues with too many dogs? I mean, obviously cats, because cats are wild.
It happens on occasion. It happens on occasion, but generally there's some other issue with the home, right? I mean, we get into situations where you have a hoarding situation where someone's got 27 cats and those type of issues, but they're normally one-offs. We don't have a huge variation of complaints that we get. Oh my gosh, my neighbor has 12 dogs.
I mean, it's almost like 3 dogs, 3 cats, 3 pot-bellied pigs, 3 ferrets, 3 goldfish, 3 cars. I mean, we're going to end up.
And a partridge in
And
a
it-
pear
yeah,
tree.
exactly. I mean,
It's not a huge issue. This is not one that is
It doesn't
driven
seem-
by. It's not one that rises to the level of. From a staff perspective, we don't see a need for it, but again, this is a policy decision the council.
Well,
can
and
make.
I think generally if someone has an overabundance of cats, they don't typically have dogs as
And
well. They
generally,
usually choose which one they're
If
going to
someone
have.
has an issue with that number of animals, there's usually some other nuisance associated with it, so we
Right.
can normally go after them for some type of a nuisance rather than just the animal section of the code. Because somebody who has 12 cats generally is going to have some smell or other things that are going on in their house.
And we could enforce the more than 3 cats, correct? All right. I don't see limiting the total number. I don't think we've had an issue.
No.
Councilmember Condit? Okay.
I suggest we just leave it where it's at.
Do we need to have a vote on that?
You're not making any changes, so there's no
Okay.
changes necessary. That is the proposed language as is.
Oh, Mr. Yeakley?
I don't know if you're inclined to answer this question. Could each one of you on the city council here give us a reason, the few of us that are here, a reason why you feel that there shouldn't be a limitation on animals? And a lot of people have a lot of cats. Some people have a lot of dogs. They're barking sometimes in different areas of the city continuously. Do we really need a lot of people having a lot of animals? Are they lonely people? What's going on? I'd be curious of what your individual answer to that is, why we need so many animals
Well,
to each household.
I don't believe that we've had a problem with anyone having an overabundance of animals. They may have 5 dogs, but then they would fall under the code where we could cite them, but I don't believe I've ever heard of someone who had, 3 dogs and 4 cats and a pop. I personally have never heard of that, and I've been here, and previously I was in the planning department, and I never heard of that.
Code
I don't-
enforcement used to be in the planning department.
Pardon me?
Code enforcement previously was in the planning department, community development, for many years.
Okay, thank you.
Are you familiar with one of your neighbors that has 3 dogs and
Oh,
3
hell
cats?
yes. Hell yes, they're all over the neighborhood. You can hear them all night long.
Well, but is it more than 3 dogs?
Some of the families directly in my area, home back here, they have multiple dogs.
Okay, yeah, but if they have multiple dogs, if they have more than 3, then they could be cited. We're talking about.
How are you going to know? I mean, they can't go onto the property to look.
They can be licensed, and the canvassings do go on there and verify the license.
But what we're,
They came down our street before, but they just ask you who's got dogs. Well, those people down there, I think they got dogs, but who knows?
but what we're really talking about is the total number of pets, and that's, that we're not willing, the council has said that we're not willing to put a limitation on that because we don't see that there's an issue. It's not changing the number of dogs you can have or the number of cats, we're just not gonna put a limit on the total number of animals.
And Mr. Duras, it's pigs. So, okay.
What's that?
And your pigs.
And my pigs, yeah. And a snake.
Okay, oh, Mr. Warren?
Real quick, does the county have a ordinance on the total number of pets?
No.
Okay, that's what's the
Do not.
question, because I know this lady that had 4 dogs and 10 cats, and she lives 1 block outside the city limits of Ceres. Personally, I know that she has 10 cats, and I know that the county has come out there and talked to her, and she says, they're not my cats, they just run around here and I feed them. So there's some issues, but thank you
There's
for
no total
answering my
number.
question.
Okay, we'll move on to Title 13.
All right, Title 13, sewer and water, or water and sewer, depending on your preference. Largely the same as what's the existing code, updated for basically legal and other standards, and the bulk of the updates relative to SB 998, which changes the process with how we have to now turn people off for non-payment. So that legislation changed the timeframes pretty significantly, so we had to update the code to reflect that, and hence why this item is coming straight to the adoption and public hearing relative to having it effective by February 1st when the state law becomes effective. So for the most part, language is all the same, again, updated to show where our new provisions are. And we did make the one change that's noted there at the bottom, that the proposed Chapter 1328, which is the cross connection, which used to be in Title 6, so that's moved here. So with that, we'll open to any questions you may have. I do have a couple notations that Councilmember Klein had sent that were edits. One little edit in 13 that we can get, or 2, I'm sorry.
Well, there's another one too that I apologize for not sending to you earlier. It would be page 35C. One, two, three, four. The 5th line on page 35C says of delinquency 10 prior to discontinuance. Would it be 10 days?
Yep. Just for the rest of the councils, just to give the other items that are proposed to be changed. On going back to page 4, the definition of lateral, it should be from rather than form. That would be on page 4. And then on page 71, section 1316.050, first line, there should be a space between this chapter. I think that was it in chapter 13, in Title 13.
Yes.
Is there anyone else on the council with any comments on Title 13? Anyone in the audience? No? Okay. So at this time, would we have a motion then for Title 6? And, no, we're going to continue Title 6.
So we have an ordinance
I think the easiest way is, if you don't want to include Title VI, you just not include Section 1 in the ordinance, which is Title VI, and then we'll just bring that back when you have another ordinance.
Okay, so it'll
Make a-
just be
Make a
making,
motion to introduce the ordinance with the exception of the current Section 1, I think is the easiest
Well,
way to do
Title
it.
VI. would
Title
be-
I would just say
Six.
Title VI
Well,
because it
it's-
is referenced in other places than just Section 1.
In the ordinance itself, it starts with Section 1 and says that's Title VI.
It's just that we'll delete out of the title as well, right?
Right.
For the ordinance reading. So it would be deleting Title VI out of the title of the ordinance and then Section 1 of the ordinance. So from a technical standpoint, they should close the public hearing,
Right. Then
to take action on the
Okay.
ordinance. Of however the council wants to take action, you can include all three, you can include two, can include one. Once you take action, and then we can discuss how you would like to consider
okay,
that item.
so I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the city council for a motion.
Move to introduce ordinance number 2019-1054, introduction with the exception of Title VI and Section 1.
Second.
Just want to note that is shown for the effective date of February 1st, 2020, the way the ordinance is written. Just want to make sure, because we didn't talk about that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Condit,
Aye.
Councilmember DeRosa,
Yes.
Councilmember Klein,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Rhino.
Yes?
Motion passes 4-0.
So then for Title VI, what I would recommend is let's do the public hearing for 9, 10, and 19, and you'll give us direction on when that should come back, and we can include a conversation with when 6 should come with the rest of those, if that's
Okay.
acceptable.
All right, so we will continue to item number 10, public hearing to consider amending in their entirety the following titles of the Ceres Municipal Code: Title 9, Public Peace, Safety, and Morals; Title 10, Vehicles and Traffic; Title 19, Code Enforcement. Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Rhino. So as we've discussed, Group 2, Titles 9, 10, and 19. So again, just the overview, Title 9 being Public Peace, Safety, and Morals, 10, Vehicles and Traffic, and 19, Code Enforcement. So again, the grouping. So schedule-wise, I'll come back to the schedule after we do the public hearing, just so we can talk how 6 rolls into that. We'll just jump right into this, and we'll come back to the schedule piece, how 6 may play into that. So, all right, Title 9. So public peace, safety, and morals. So as was discussed at the council previously, Title 9 was pretty significantly revised. We did show you a matrix during the discussion of the items that were deleted. These are a few of those chapters that were significantly changed or deleted. Of note, 952 solicitation. That's the aggressive panhandling section of our code. Based on very, very strong advice from the city attorney, that section has come under significant fire at the state level, and there is a number of pending lawsuits that basically render that definition and that portion of our code as unenforceable. So the recommendation at this point from the city attorney is to eliminate that section, wait for the legal minefield to be cleared, and then bring back some language that would pass legal muster on the solicitation piece. Again, Picture Arcades was deleted. These other items were moved from Title 9 to Title 5, and that's a discussion item for the future. And we'll get into a few of the new titles that were added. We talked about noise, scooters, drones, and we look for your input and the public's input as we move forward on Title 9.
On Chapter 3, the emergency alarms, it looks like we're making quite a few changes in that.
It
So-
went back to
We haven't apparently got to the section that you're talking.
Yeah, A through I or whatever it is.
I guess I should have opened the public hearing already.
Well, you were asking, the council was asking questions before you
Okay.
opened the public hearing, but however you'd like to do it.
So the BB gun, we've always allowed those to be shot in the city as long as you didn't I mean, as
I
long as it
believe,
didn't
I
go...
believe that's the case, but I'm not 100% confident on that.
All right.
Because we got Sergeant Cooley saying no.
I don't recall.
What did he say? Yeah,
don't
we have
believe it-
not allowed...
But I don't believe the ordinance has been as clear. We can continue and come back to that item if you'd like.
All right.
Red Ryder, too smooth,
That's what I'm thinking.
lose an eye.
Does anyone have any other questions on Title IX? Under 9.16, 100 acts prohibited in city parks. I think in the old section, we had firearms were prohibited, but now it doesn't say that. It was in the old section was XX 18.100C.
But it's covered in the section we were just in, 914.
So it still says that they can have it in city parks?
Correct.
Okay.
The section we were just reading, 914.02, specifically said, or within any city-owned park situated.
Okay. So now I should open the public hearing.
At your discretion.
I'll open the public hearing and see if anyone in the audience has any comments on Title IX. Are you talking about nuisances? Noises are under Title IX, yes.
904. The new section is 904.
Yes. That was when we had the big discussion about the time.
Got ahead of me somewhere. I was still thinking you were still going through 936.020.
We're at 9.04,
Oh,
which
wow,
is
you're way ahead.
noise. Maybe you're in the old section and it's been renumbered?
I have no idea. But it covers the thing you just, in the horns, stereos, animals, birds, exhausts,
Right,
construction.
that's what we just
Let's talk about-
discussed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's 9.04020.
So I had some notations on those.
Okay, well, go ahead and tell us what they are.
Okay, in Part E, 9316020, originally the construction time was 7 in the morning till 8 p.m. at night. I have no
Yes.
problem with the 7 o'clock in the morning. Again, you know, the few or the many or whatever, I think that time should be changed to like when somebody gets off of work or something. You know, I got people in my own neighborhood that are mowing the lawns when it's dark and on by the street light at 9 o'clock at night, you know?
Well, are you talking about construction of repairing of buildings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it says that you cannot do it between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., and you wanted to change the 8 p.m. to an earlier time?
No, you can do it from 7 to 8.
Okay.
7 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
Okay,
I'd like to see that changed from 7 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. So when people get home, they've commuted, whatever, they've got their kids at home and all that stuff, you don't have all this weed eaters going and blowers and lawnmowers and,
but when would they do it if
This is
they've been...
construction, not weed eaters and lawnmowers.
well, okay, excuse me.
The section you're referring to is
Yeah.
construction and repair, and again, the 8 p.m. is relative to new home construction when you're building homes in the summer, when it's not uncommon for construction to go while you have daylight. So that time frame of 8 p.m. is where that comes from.
Yeah, Toby, I think it's also included in section G, talks about machinery, I think.
The machinery, right, but just
Right.
different
But
section.
machinery, would that be lawnmowers and...
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, so there's two separate sections, so you could
Right.
change it in one and not in the other. If your complaint is about lawnmowers, then I would suggest, if the council's going to consider it, changing it in G, not in E. So just clarify, there's two separate sections.
Well,
Well, I think with daylight savings time and somebody works in the Bay Area and they get home, when are they going to mow their yard? They're going to mow their yard probably
Saturday or
at
Sunday?
7 o'clock, right?
7 o'clock at night?
Yes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Or
Sometimes
even
later than
maybe 8 o'clock,
that.
which,
Sometimes 9 o'clock, too.
okay.
Yeah.
But this says that they can do it, right? Operation between the hours of 8 o'clock and 7 a.m. is not allowed. So they could actually mow their yard until 8 o'clock at night. And you wanted to change that to 6 p.m.
Right.
And I don't think you want to do that, because what about working people? They have to be able to come home, feed their kids or whatever, and then they still have to go out and do their work. I mean, I don't think you can
Or
take
maybe they
that.
need to get their kids off the sofa and the video games. No, I just think that's my thought. And, where I live, it's a problem, especially during the summertime too, It's nice to, the whole thing is of this, reconstruction of this stuff is to make Ceres a little bit better place to live. And one of the issues is to not have conflicting things to disturb people, so we can live in this nice community and have things change and get back to some type of normal.
And I agree with that, but you also have to think about the people who are working and they
Yeah,
want to.
I understand
Okay.
that.
And I don't think allowing people to mow their yard up until 8 o'clock at night is an unreasonable thing.
Right, just my thought.
That's my personal belief, and
I
I don't.
agree with you. 100%.
All right. Is
What
there?
about the machinery stuff?
Well,
you
that
know?
is the machinery section. That would cover the lawnmowers. and
Part
leaf-
G?
I'm sorry?
That would include Part G?
That is Part G that we're talking about.
Okay. Because we've got people that are grinding stuff, for several days in the past. And again, the people across the street, they're mowing their lawn at, after 8 and 9 o'clock at night by the street light in front of their house.
Okay, well, the code allows them up until 8 o'clock, so if they're doing it at 9 o'clock, then it would be a violation.
And the police department's gonna go out for that?
I don't know that they are going to, but you're saying you want to change it back to 6 p.m., and
There needs to be
I think 8 p.m. is reasonable, Mr. Yeakley.
okay. Another thing, it just come across my mind, is, Part I, 936 of 020, has to
Oh.
do with
Snow cones, ice cream trucks?
ice cream truck, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sounds kind of stupid, but you might think about it if they come in your neighborhood. Excuse me.
Well, it says soft music.
Yeah, okay. I think the issue that I have is that when the ice cream man or whoever's vending or whatever comes down the street, they got the music playing, that's fine. If they stop, I believe they should turn that off, because they should only keep that thing going while it's moving. When it stopped, they've been across my house down the street and it sits there, ning, 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 ning.
Well, again, it should be soft music, and I don't think that we're going to tell them when they're
Shouldn't it
making
be
a sale.
only on while it's moving?
Well, I don't
They have a
think,
customer shut it off?
who's going to police that?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, I can only speak for myself, and I think that is unrealistic.
Even
I
if
mean,
they
if the music is quiet and it's not blaring, I mean, does it really matter that they're parked next door to your house? And they've
Sometimes
got,
they're
and they've
across the
got
street.
Junior, and they're selling ice cream to Junior. How long does that take? And then they move. You're still gonna hear the music.
But it's moving away. It's not directly in front of your house. I'm talking about when they don't have a sale and they just sit there with this thing going on and on and on, and nobody's coming by.
Well,
to
if
buy.
nobody's coming by, maybe you should go out there and buy an ice cream, and then they would move on. I don't know.
Yeah, that's an idea, huh?
Okay. You have any other comments, Mr. Yeakley?
Yeah, on sign issues of posting of signs in the city?
Is that part of where we're at? That is not part of this
It's
section.
not on there?
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay. Okay, that's the end of that section. Oh, number H.
H out of what chapter?
Well, it'd be under the unnecessary noises.
Same section, 904.
Motor vehicles?
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand by law enforcement, they got a state law, statute, something about a distance between when they're coming down the street and playing music and stuff, and how far it can be out of the vehicle.
Okay.
Is there some way we can change that in our own district, of being the city of Ceres, to where we can,
I don't think can we supersede the
state law?
state motor vehicle code law?
No, you can't? And what is it presently, 50 feet, 25 feet,
50.
50? All right. Well, that puts most of the people that do that in jeopardy, huh? Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else with any comments on Title IX?
Real quick on what he touched on I, the snow cone ice cream guys, the vehicle code section actually covers that, because when they do stop, they have to turn off the music. So it is covered under the vehicle code.
Thank you. All right, so are we ready to move on to?
Yes.
Do we need to review the new titles, noise, scooter, drones? Does the public have any comment on noise? We've already done that. Scooters or drones for the city council?
Going back to that chapter 14, your question on item B there regarding that exception.
Oh.
It's not in the existing code. So the existing code says it's unlawful, and there's not an exception for it. So B could be deleted to be consistent with the existing code, or you could leave it. It's a policy decision for the council.
I guess we can leave it if it, we'll leave it.
Yep.
Okay, and no one wants to discuss scooters, drones? Anyone in the audience? No. So we will move on to Title 19?
Title 10.
Title 10. Can we just move to 19? All right, we'll go back to 6.
We pulled that, we pulled that.
Table
Oh.
6.
We pulled that.
We tabled it,
No,
sorry.
she's talking about chapter 6
Oh,
of Title 9,
okay,
Oh,
not Title 6.
but thank you for that.
My question is why the city hasn't taken this opportunity in that section to make it mandatory for future businesses and give a time frame for other businesses to install wheel locks on all their shopping carts.
We did talk about that, and I believe the majority of the council felt it would be too
Cost burden.
costly for any businesses, new businesses coming in, and they didn't want to discourage new businesses. I believe that was.
Yeah, I actually had brought that up, and I was in support of that.
The council at the discussion of this item directed this section of the title to go back to the existing code. That was the direction for the discussion.
So have you ever worked the numbers of the shopping carts that are returned or that are out there abandoned or taken to nearby cities, and the cost that it costs those businesses because they lose those carts, and the cost for cities to go out and deal with the carts and pick them up and impound them and all that?
I don't believe we have.
We have not.
Plus the blight in the city.
we take the
city's looking at blight.
Council gave us direction, and that's what's provided here. The code is in essence what was previously in place.
Does anyone on the council want to revisit the mandatory cart locking system?
I was in favor of it originally. I would still be in favor of it, but I know that the rest of the council does not desire to implement that.
No. So the majority would say no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to Title 10. So as referenced in the staff report and as shown in here, there were two sections that legal team didn't quite get finished in order to make this public hearing this evening, and that's sections 1007 on the motorhome and 1009, which council direction again from the discussion was to move those back to their existing language. So they are working on that currently. When it comes for the adoption public hearing, we'll have that language included, but wanted to make note of those two, that it is existing code for those two sections.
You know, Toby, I had brought this up before under the definition of recreational vehicle, and it says a motorhome that exceeds 20 feet in overall length, but there are a lot of motorhomes that are less than 20 feet. So why do we have that number in there? It's page 4 of 71, and it's recreational vehicle.
Don't know the answer. Can look
All
into
right.
that.
So, all right.
Yep, we'll research that.
So we still will be talking about Chapter 4, Rules for Stopping, Standing, and Parking. Is that correct, under Title 10?
It's included.
Okay.
So those are the items, the two things that we wanted to bring it, that we didn't have discussion on last time of 1004 was a new section, again, language from another city, on that, the section that I have highlighted in your package, 1004-210. In that particular area relative to the repair of vehicles or boats in residential districts. So this is new language proposed that came from another city that is significantly more restrictive on the repairs that can be done in a residential district. So we didn't talk about that in a discussion item, so I just wanted to make sure council was comfortable with this restriction, because it's pretty significantly different than what exists today in the code. We do not have this level of restriction today.
But with what is proposed here, they could still have a vehicle in their driveway and cover it with a tarp.
Well, this isn't storage. This is repair. This is actively working. This section specifically, 1004-210, is talking specifically about the repair, and it
Or
significantly
dismantling in public view.
right. So this significantly
Wouldn't it be sitting there then?
no, that's covered in the other section. That's the 1014-1-4.
Okay.
And just reading this 1004, I just found it in conflict with a little bit with Title 19 on page 31. Just some of those definitions, just maybe we can get some clarity on both sections, because I know it kind of goes back and forth there.
If you can give us some specifics.
Okay. Well, on 1004,
So the first question is 1004-210. Is the council want to put this level of restriction on repair of vehicles? Because it significantly limits what a person can do repair-wise at their home.
But it seems common sense that you don't want people working on a vehicle in their driveway, and then they just leave it and they go off somewhere, correct? Is that what it's doing?
It's a little more onerous than that in terms of its structure. But again, it's a departure from the existing code, so I want to make sure council's aware of that. And from a legal perspective, this is language that other cities have used. I just wanted to make sure council was comfortable with the restrictions that's provided.
I guess when I looked at the old code, I didn't really notice that there was,
This doesn't exist in the old code. This
Okay.
limitation doesn't exist.
okay. But this doesn't look to me to be a bad thing about people repairing vehicles in their driveway.
no, yeah, I don't think so as well. I just found it in conflict with Title 19. I know we'll get to that next on page 31 when dealing with the restoration or renovation that is solely improves the interior or exterior appearance of a vehicle. And so I just found it a little conflicting.
Okay.
So just as it's written, so 1004-210B,
Yes.
except as otherwise provided in this chapter, no person shall perform routine maintenance or major repairs in public view in a residential district on a vehicle or boat unless the following. Such person is the resident, and the work is done in a fully enclosed garage or building behind a 6-foot fence, capable of screening the motor vehicle parts there from public view, and the door of such garage or fence is closed when the repairs are not in progress.
So what you're saying is if somebody wanted to change their oil in their driveway, they couldn't?
Correct.
Then on letter C, it does mention a carport within a carport, but up top on number 3, it's a garage. So is there an exemption for carports?
No, it's saying it's unlawful in a carport as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
So it basically has to be in the garage. That's why I'm bringing this to your attention. Repairs or maintenance, routine maintenance, oil change has to be in the garage. Work being done in the garage, and the garage closed when the work is completed.
Well, I think that might be.
That's very different
I
than what we have
disagree
today.
with that.
Well,
That's why I'm bringing it to
think,
council's attraction.
I
it's a
don't
policy
think when
decision.
people change their oil, they're gonna necessarily pull it in the garage. I don't know what
I
the
couldn't
rest.
get my car in the garage anyway, but I don't like that.
Hence why I'm bringing it up.
I don't know how.
Councilmember Klein?
No, I don't agree with it.
Okay.
I change all my oil in my cars, and I do it in my driveway.
And that's very common. That's the way our code allows that today. Our code is silent on that piece. There is some reference to the abandoned vehicles and storage, but that piece is not discussed.
Well, but
Routine
that-
maintenance is,
Okay, so how can we change that? So something as simple as changing your oil, you could do, we just don't want them
you could
tearing
just change
apart.
it. Yeah, you could change it to routine maintenance. You take the routine maintenance out of there. If you're comfortable with that, we can revise the language to allow for routine maintenance, but not major repair. Then it gets difficult from a code enforcement to what.
I can
what
agree
is-
with that, because, changing an engine out or a transmission is a little different.
Yeah.
But, I change my own oil. Most of the time I do my own brakes, and I do it in the driveway.
So, just for definition purposes, because that's where routine maintenance and major may break down, we may need to provide some definitions there, but from the council's perspective, routine maintenance would be considered oil changes, transmission fluid, brakes. Something
Yes.
is typically done in a couple hours versus a transmission replacement, an engine replacement, or a complete overhaul.
Yes.
So the concept, you're okay with the major repairs being significantly limited, routine maintenance you're okay
Yeah.
with?
Yes.
Okay. We can make those changes.
Yeah, same 3 words.
Yeah, yeah.
Before you go to 1014-140,
Mhm.
back at 10.04, I think it's under 04080. It looks like the verbiage in that section would allow somebody to park their vehicle on their lawn. Do we allow that currently?
So the prohibition, or where we're looking to make changes, is in Title 18, the zoning code, where it would prohibit that. So which section are you specifically looking at?
I was looking at 100480. Prohibited parking areas.
So you would prefer to have a new,
Well, I'm just asking, do
say,
we,
V, because it doesn't exist in our code today.
it does or does not?
Does not. It's
But I-
not specifically specified as a non-parking area. It does not exist in our code today, but we are clarifying it in the zoning code in 18 to clarify that's not permitted. But if you'd like to add a section here, I don't believe that would be in conflict.
Well, I think if we're going to have it in the zoning ordinance, we might as well have it here, since this spells out what you can park on your private property. But that would be me.
I would agree.
So you would like it specifically identified, and we can cross-reference 18 as well.
I would, but I don't know, we have 2 of us, but I don't know how Councilmember Kleiner DeRosset feel. Do you care if people park on their lawns?
Just don't park on mine.
That is covered. You have to give permission for somebody to park on your lawn. That is covered.
That is covered?
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things. I mean, it looks tacky. I know on Caswell, there's an individual who parks their motorhome on their grass, you know.
And they have an area in front where they could park it on the street for how many hours, how many days? 3?
And they have to move it.
72
And they're
hours.
usually not there that long either.
There's some houses that have boats on the yard and cars and trucks, you know.
That's what the language is specifically identifying here in this section, that would be prohibited.
I'm good with it.
Well, and it goes back to one of those confusing things. Because if you have permission by the owner, you can park the boat on the thing because the owner's given permission for his own boat to be parked there.
No, the section reads, you can't park a vehicle unless you have permission, but that doesn't allow you to park anywhere. There's still other sections that prohibit where you can park those things, but you can't just park your vehicle anywhere. You can't go park in someone else's driveway without their permission.
Right.
So that's what this section is referring to, where you can legally park. You can't park on somebody's property without their permission. What this is
No,
asking
but what
for-
I'm saying is a little confusing because, okay, in my household, for instance, all my kids show up, if them and the spouse takes different cars, I live in an old, small cul-de-sac, they park 2 wide on my front lawn, 2 or 3 deep, okay, for a family gathering on a Sunday for dinner. Doesn't pull up, doesn't take the space of the cul-de-sac, they don't have to walk, you know, from around the corner. They're there temporarily, a couple hours, they're gone, okay? But if I give my kid permission to put his boat there, that means he has permission, and it
That
goes
would-
back.
Under this code section, that wouldn't be allowed either. Neither would
And
be-
I don't want it allowed either for that. I mean, the temporary, which I do for a couple hours when the kids are there, to me, that's fine.
That would be
but-
prohibited under the language that was just suggested. That would not be allowed.
So you let your kids park on your lawn?
When everybody's around the house, yes, I do.
I thought your whole thing was concrete.
No, the city won't let me do that.
What?
But it's Bermuda grass.
So 3 of you have indicated you're comfortable with adding that prohibition, parking on the lawn, and that would
Yes.
apply to boats or vehicles.
Yes.
And we'll clarify, what we'll need to do is we'll cross-reference 18, so we provide language as to a better definition of what is yard and that type of thing, because Tom's working on that section currently.
I mean, it's fine. I mean, code enforcement doesn't work on Sunday, so I don't have to worry about them coming around my house.
How did I know that was going to come up?
I thought it was.
Well, we're in that section. Can I ask a question about 1004-230 curb? Does that address cul-de-sac parking?
That was one of the discussions we had last time, and I lost out. They said we had to park parallel with the curb.
That's what that's,
So that covers the cul-de-sac? Okay.
okay. On to 1014.
Well, I actually have a question on Chapter 6.
Of course.
Disabled. It says under Chapter 6, 106020B, no, B2. It says, by outlining a profile view of a wheelchair with occupant in white on a blue background of the same dimensions as in subsection A1 of this section. Well, isn't it A1 and A2? It's not just A1. Because you could have either of those as your lettering.
Yeah, I mean, 601, yeah, you could say
So
A1 and
that
A2.
should say A1
One and or A2.
or 2, yeah. Oh, Mr. Yeakley?
Can we go back to what Mr. Klein was, he's wanting to park on the lawn.
Yes.
And then somewhere along the line, Toby said something about, well, I assume that he was talking about something you asked about pulling forward on the courts, you know, like,
Oh, that was a different section.
Was it?
The curb. It's a it delineates the curb parking, 1004.230, and Mr. Wells said that does address the cul-de-sac parking.
so in other words,
Issue of cul-de-sac parking where people pull in
Pull
with straight in instead of parallel parking.
The vehicle code prohibits that, and this section specifically prohibits it. Two right-hand side wheels should be 18 inches parallel to the curb. That's the definition.
Which
by
means you're,
state law.
right.
That's this.
So there's
code's
not
in-
going to be any change to what the state law is on parallel parking with the curb.
Correct.
Okay.
State law already, and then
Yeah.
we
I
go.
thought there was
one
some
step-
kind of correlation between Mr. Klein's wanting to do that and, hey, what the
No.
hell, let's
We didn't change anything.
park
He
the
just
cars
likes to
there too.
confuse us.
So
Not changed.
that means I have no curb parking in front of my house,
You moved on a court.
I-
You knew that when you moved there.
you know?
You think of those poor souls in other cities.
And
like-
and as you see, I'm not voting on changing it.
Yeah, I understand. But think of those people who live in cities like San Francisco when they don't have no driveways, a lot of homes, and they have to park several blocks away and carry their kids and groceries home.
And like I said, I'm one person, and I did not vote to change it.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
There's
Thank
more dogs than kids in San Francisco, so just to let you know. Just came out with a new study that said that. Thought it was hilarious.
All right, so
Ryan,
now,
what are you talking about? You didn't vote to change what? I don't know if was I here at that time?
no, he,
Cul-de-sac parking?
yes, we didn't change anything the
We
way
didn't change
it
it.
currently
Still the
is.
same.
So you and me, because we both live in a cul-de-sac,
Uh-huh.
when you pull straight into the front of your house, that's illegal.
But it's always been illegal. You may not want to admit to anything right now.
I'm gonna take the fifth.
So that, I
It's-
mean,
it's for emergency vehicles. If there's
I
an
mean,
emergency.
when my
cannot
kids
come
lived at home and they parked in front of the house and they pulled straight in, technically that was illegal. They could have been cited.
About special holidays.
Sunday for
I'm kidding.
him. So we're going to move on to chapter 14.
Unless there's something else to look at before then.
Anyone? Nope, okay. Is this where we're going to talk about tarps?
So one note in one of the notations that Councilmember Klein indicated, 101402 A, it said within a side or rear year, that should be yard, so we made that correction. And then in B, I recognized a little edit there where it says solid fence 6 feet with the parentheses 6 foot and an underline. That should be 6 foot with a parentheses. So we'll make that little correction.
Well, while you're in that same chapter, C, when it says about a licensed vehicle dealer, does that mean that if someone has a license for a car lot, that they could bring home those cars that they're selling?
Tom, I believe that is the case. Because it doesn't, so the applicability of the chapter, so 1014 abandoned vehicles does not apply to those specific businesses. Licensed dismantler, licensed vehicle dealer. junk
Oh, I
dealer.
see, it does not apply, okay,
Yeah, it's the exceptions.
all right.
Can you explain something to me? On 1014-020B, when you said, behind a solid 6-foot fence in height, or which is plainly visible from a highway, so if it's plainly visible from the highway, it's legal?
It should be not, which is not plainly visible vehicle.
Thank you.
And so the section that we spent most of the time on at the discussion, 1014-140, we took a shot at the language based on that conversation and that discussion, but this is draft language there to try to capture the conversation that council had regarding that abandoned vehicle. It kind of goes to the point, Mr. Warren, from earlier with the way the language is today versus the proposed language here. We look for council's direction on that proposed language. sure if you have that. We haven't, that's why I'm giving that to you. They have not.
Is this the section where we talk about the tarps?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So according to this, somebody could park a abandoned vehicle on their driveway, cover it with the tarp, and
Not a tarp, properly fitted car cover.
Okay, and where is that?
That's under item 2 there.
Item,
Vehicle has a valid California DMV non-operational permit and is parked in a lawful manner on private property with a fitted vehicle cover.
okay. So that takes care of my tarp issues.
Correct.
All right. Anyone on the council have any comments on that section? Anyone in the audience have a comment? Mr. Yeakley?
Would that same section cover canopies that people put over their cars? That's a form of a tarp.
No.
No, that's,
While they're working on their cars or?
no.
No?
No.
That's another
And
area?
I think those, in most cases, are illegal, aren't they? Because they're not far enough
Kind of
behind.
two things. One, I think that if somebody's working on their vehicle and they have an easy up type structure while they're working on it, that's no big deal. I think that what Vice Mayor Rhino is suggesting is something that's more permanent in nature. Those are already illegal.
Yeah,
Car-
when they have like cement
Carport, those
cans
temporary-
and they're there
correct,
permanently for
Yep,
months
that's-
on end.
That's not a legal structure.
not
Yeah,
permitted.
Mr. Warren?
Thank you, John Warren. So this is what's proposed?
Correct. Per the direction the council gave us at the discussion.
I don't remember the council telling you that they wanted to allow someone to apply for a non-op permit.
The council provided direction to propose language.
Excuse me, let me finish,
I
please.
just wanted to clarify. That's why we're here this evening.
I don't believe the council gave direction on a non-op permit, which is something that you can buy one time and it lasts forever. What this does is allow someone to put a piece of junk in their driveway, get a non-op permit, cover it with a tarp that becomes dilapidated, and it's forever.
Okay, well, I already asked the question about the tarp, and now there is verbiage in here that says it has to be a fitted car cover, which is different than a tarp,
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes. The owners on my street and on my adjacent street have fitted car covers. They last about 6 months. Right now, I have pictures of them on my camera where they're totally dilapidated and hanging on the ground.
So do we,
We could
do
add
we need
language, fitted and properly maintained.
properly maintained?
So that means code enforcement or the police department's got to come by every 6 months and jack them up to get them to cover it again. What we're trying to do, what not do, is have our community look like a junkyard. The councils before you had a nice rule in place that basically said they do not want pieces of junk in driveways. They want people to be able to park their own private vehicles in the driveways and not clutter them up with stuff that's never going to be repaired. Renovation and restoring a classical vehicle is one thing. There's usually a time period, and most people who do that put them inside a garage and they take care of them because these are expensive kinds of cars. A piece of junk that sits out there forever and ever and ever and years and years and years, such as on Henry Drive and on Canyon Drive and some of these other places in town on Dale and all these places, are just pieces of junk and need to be removed.
And they have non-ops on them, is what
I
you're
have
saying?
no idea whether they do or they don't. Code enforcement, I believe, has checked on this, and it's just come up recently to do the non-op thing. A non-op thing, all it is, well, we've discussed it, you know what it is. It's just a temporary thing that allows you to not operate it on the highway, and you don't have to pay the fees and penalties when you re-register it. And it lasts forever. It's one $15 application. Person that can't get rid of the junk or wants to keep it, like my neighbor, for his son when he gets to be 22 years old and the kid's 5 years old now, we don't want to look at that stuff for 20 years. It needs to be someplace else other than in the driveway. It
So,
needs to be behind the fence.
so the answer would be that if it's not running within a certain amount of time, then it needs to,
Make him apply for a permit
a permit for what?
to leave the vehicle in the driveway and charge him $1,000 for the permit. Do something to discourage people. I mean, if you want to allow it in the driveway, make it so it's going to cost them to put it there and be a piece of junk in the driveway. And make the permit renewable once a year.
Okay, does the,
I mean, all this section does here is allow someone to put a piece of junk in their driveway and leave it there forever. And no one comes around and checks. And I understand code enforcement and your abandoned vehicle folks, they don't have the time to keep rechecking up on these people. Come by every 6 months and say, hey, excuse me, get a new darn tarp or get a new cover.
okay, so currently, thank you, we would allow a junked vehicle, if it had a non-op, it could be a junked vehicle and just sit in the driveway forever, correct? If it was a non-op.
We're hoping to get clarification and get the code for council to make a policy decision here so that we consistently apply that, because it has been, in the past, we believe, inconsistently applied over years. And to the discussion this council had last time on the, I believe, the split window 62 Corvette that's sitting in the driveway with a car cover on it versus the 1942 Willys Jeep with no tires on it. That's was the wrestling match. So the extremes of the conversation are prohibit them all. It's just not permitted, period. And one could interpret our existing code as being written that way. The other extreme would be allowing everything without any cover. What was proposed here based on the direction that was, and admittedly it was, the council wrestled with this, and that's why it's being brought back. This is trying to find some balance there. But again, Mr. Warren's idea of a permit, a limited time, those are all things. I'm not sure if I've ever heard of anybody having a permit for this type of vehicle, but doesn't mean that we couldn't. But we'll look for council direction on a policy. This is clearly a policy decision we need council direction on.
Any comment? Are you okay with people leaving junked vehicles in their driveway?
Well, we're not allowing them to park on the grass. You know, I mean, it's, and they're all not junk vehicles. I bet you they're all not junk vehicles, you know.
In the eye of the beholder, right? To
There's-
someone, to a certain individual, they could be a junk vehicle, but to the
Well, if
person
they're
that owns
not,
it,
if they're not drivable, that would be a junked vehicle, I would think.
in a lot of people's opinions, but in others, that's,
Not talking about a collector car, because those, like people say, typically they keep those inside the garage. Mrs. Meyer, would you like to say something?
Brandy Meyer, hypothetically speaking, what if it is a pop-up tent trailer? This is not a moving vehicle or a junk vehicle, but a recreational vehicle that's used regularly, a pop-up tent trailer that has a silver tarp, hypothetically, around it that's clean and maintained. Is that included in part of this no tarp?
I would think it would be.
I
wouldn't it
believe
be?
the recreational vehicle is covered separately. There's a different code section on that, but I don't recall off the top of my head, but we can verify.
Do you put it, is it hypothetically, would it be over the whole thing, or is it just around the edge?
It's over the top to keep the rain off because the window on the top leaks a little bit, so it's to keep it over, but it's a silver, it covers the entire top, but it's bound, so it's nice and tight. It's not flapping around or, it's nice and clean.
Yeah.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically speaking, is that a code infraction with the tarp?
It's a good question. It may be in somewhat of a gray area, but we can. Vehicle, as defined in this chapter, is a device by which a person or property may be propelled, moved, or drawn upon a highway, except a device moved by human power exclusive upon stationary. So if it doesn't have a mechanism to drive it, it wouldn't be a vehicle. So it would be. Yeah. Good question. We'd look into it and verify. I don't know
Okay.
off the top of my head.
Hypothetically,
Hypothetically,
we'll look into that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
hypothetical. I believe it is in the RV section, but I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay.
Going back to the aspect of it's
The junked vehicle or
A
not?
junk vehicle, or, you know, my mother just passed and it's her car and I got no place to put it. I'm not gonna pay $300 to put it in storage each month.
But,
you know?
but is it drivable?
It could be,
Oh,
but maybe,
it isn't.
maybe I don't wanna pay the tags for it, you know, and, cause I'm not gonna be driving it. I'm not gonna be doing anything with it right now, you know? I mean, I feel bad for the people that have that type of a thing in front of their house or their next door neighbor.
So how do we address that?
I don't know, you know, I mean, are we also gonna say you can't have 3 cars in a 2-car driveway? I mean, at the very end of the day, because we can't park in a cul-de-sac going straight,
And you can't park on your grass.
and you can't park on your grass, but you can have your garbage can on the side of the house, but that's besides the point.
You just like to bring up wounds, don't you?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, I mean, all this stuff could be, you know, this close, just what Brandy just brought up, you know, is now all of a sudden we're saying no tarps, but you can't have your thing in front because it's probably gonna be, you can't have a tarp on it now.
Well, it's
So
not
it's gonna
her,
leak.
it isn't hers.
No,
Be
but
clear
I'm
about
just
that,
using as an
hypothetically.
example, you know. So, you know, we want to help our citizens out the best we can. We want our town to look as great as it can, you know, with all these other, you know, roadblocks and detours. But yeah, at the end of the day, if it's covered up, and you know, if they have to go buy a new tarp, and maybe we do put a permit or a fine to it,
Well, we don't want a tarp.
a car cover that fits.
Properly
Fitted
fitted
car
and
Properly fitted
maintained.
car cover. You know, if 1 ounce of that's showing, that's $1,000 fine, or whatever that number is, you know.
Councilmember Condit?
I would agree with some of what the councilman had said. I would be open to a permit or some sort of avenue such as that. So I do think that makes sense.
Big fine, too.
And a big fine if that's what you want, sure.
But would that also include the fitted car cover or not? And then what's the time frame that if this vehicle, and who's going to be able to monitor that this vehicle, I guess somebody complains and then code enforcement would note that it's still there and it hasn't moved. It's not like when you get a ticket on the street and they've marked your tire.
Right.
Are they going to do that as well?
Again, that's a
Councilmember
program I haven't
Klein?
heard of. We'll have to look into it to see.
And if
but-
there was a permit, it would be registered with the city, technically, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So if there was a complaint, they would be able to go in and look.
But is that a permit to allow them to keep their inoperable vehicles sitting on their driveway? I don't-
And see, that's where, when we get to Title 19, page 31, there's some more clarification I would like regarding that, because there says that they can submit a letter to the Community Development Director. So we'll talk about that when we get to Title 19. But yeah, I would,
I don't think we were clear on what we want to do about
You weren't.
junked vehicles.
You were
Okay. Councilmember
consistent with the
Klein.
discussion item.
Councilmember Klein?
I heard you.
Okay.
And I understand Mr. Warren's concerns on the vehicle. You know, I don't want a rundown wrecked vehicle, you know, next to me that is going to collect cobwebs and everything else that comes with it. But again, it goes back to what I discussed last time about, you know, a collector car or whatever, and there's a stipulation in here that as far as appraisal, you know, if I read this thing right, so, you know, if we send out an appraiser and it's not deemed a classical car and it doesn't have an engine and transmission, then the process should be made that that unoperable car needs to be disposed of. Because, you know, there is situations that people can't park a classic car or a car they're going to restore in their in their garage. But, you know, again, I think that, you know, if it's not worth anything, then it needs to be removed.
Well, what about if we say something that it's inoperative and it can't, you can't have cobwebs or anything? No, I'm serious. Wouldn't that make it junkier looking than if somebody just parked a vehicle and left it in their driveway? I mean, is that better than having a car there that's got cobwebs all over the place? I don't know how we can come to an agreement on that. Well, okay, but then again, then they can be cited for that, is what I'm saying. I don't know how we can appease the issue, is what I'm saying, because I understand that as well. Sure, but why don't you step up so we can hear you?
The ordinance that's in place now is very specific, unregistered or registered or unlicensed, that's inoperable, has to be out of public view. Put it behind a fence, okay? We don't need to change that. All we need to do is enforce it and realize why it was placed there to begin with. And that was for our folks. And there's not very many of them in the city. Most of the folks are great. They take care of their properties. It's the very few, 10% of the people are 90% of the problem. And that's what we're dealing with here. Unfortunately, we have to make some rules and regulations. Or like just my neighbor who tells me, hey, I bought this for my kid 20 years from now. We don't want it sitting there 20 years. It's a 1946 Chevrolet pickup, and it's probably a restorable vehicle. But here again, there really isn't any definitions in the vehicle code anywhere what a classic car is or what an antique car is. I've researched it. There's no definition.
Doesn't
for
exist.
That. There's
But you
rules
didn't-
about smog.
Okay, but you didn't want them to be able to have a non-op vehicle
A
sitting in.
non-op doesn't do anything. It still sits there.
But then that,
What we're doing is giving them permission to leave it there.
but what in the case of, say, Councilmember DeRossett, and he's got a family member who passed away, no one is wanting to drive the vehicle, they don't want to keep it insured, right?
But where does he want
So-
to store it? On the grass?
No, on his driveway, and he's not going to pay registration, so he's going to do a non-op. What about that? Shouldn't he be able to do that?
The vehicle is probably operable, okay? I
That-
mean,
that's what
it can
I'm-
be driven around the block, it's operational, it falls into the ramification where it would be okay to put it there, all right?
But he would have to register it, and he doesn't want to do that.
Well,
Because-
that's true, that becomes another issue.
That's the issue, that the non-op would allow him to do that.
Unfortunately, we have to make rules that are gonna incorporate a lot of things that we don't like, to avoid the things that we don't like.
Well, that's why I'm suggesting that maybe the non-op, as long as you don't have cobwebs and debris and everything
Well,
else.
that becomes unenforceable. I mean, no cobwebs getting under cars, cobwebs getting your eaves. No one goes outside and does a lot of dusting and cobweb. It's just, as with the councilman's case, how long is the vehicle gonna be there? And maybe that has to be, maybe it's gonna be there for a certain period of time until they decide how they're gonna dispose of it. And maybe you need to put, something like these that I have reported have been there for 5 or 6 or 7 years, okay? I'm sure that he's probably not gonna have this in his driveway for that length of time. And if he does, then maybe he needs to be encouraged to send it on down the road.
Well, what in the case of a family member that is in the military, they're deployed, they're gonna leave their vehicle on mom and dad's driveway, they don't wanna pay the registration because they're gonna be deployed for 18 months, 2 years, we're not gonna allow them to have a non-op. Their vehicle is perfectly fine, but again, they don't want to register it because they're a service member. They don't have a lot of money. They don't want to keep the insurance on it. So by not allowing non-op in those cases, is that also, that isn't fair?
I think the section says registered or unregistered. It could be either way. It could be registered or unregistered. I think the key is operational, inoperative.
But then
All the
code
parts.
enforcement has to stop and say,
So if
rev it
it's-
up and let me see if it's working.
Well, that's, part of it. Once they've checked it and they know it's operational, then they don't need to come back there again.
So you want to leave the code as it is, with the exception of
I think,
a fitted car cover
yeah, I just
that's maintained.
think that if it's a piece of junk, it needs to go down the road. And there's a lot of common sense involved, okay, in that sometimes too, as well as trying to enforce it with the letter of the law.
All right, thank you. Councilmember
That's it.
it.
Klein?
Well, and it goes back to when you're talking about behind a fence. 3 of my neighbors have no side yard in my cul-de-sac. None of them, 3 of them. I mean, not none of them. 3 of them don't have any side yards. Eastgate, when Eastgate was developed, how many of those houses in Eastgate have an actual side yard that they can put an RV trailer? Or,
But many of them have 3-car garages with a pull-through.
well, okay, but, you know, that's a different story. Many of them do, many of them don't. But they have no side yard to put anything behind a fence. So, I mean, I do understand where Mr. Warren's at. You know, I agree with him. I don't want some junk car, you know, parked in my neighborhood and been there for a long period of time. But, you know, what do I do with a neighbor that has a car that he's got for his grandson that he's, you know, gonna try to work on together, and he's got no side yard to put it on? And yet he keeps it maintained around it. I mean, my cobwebs are off my eaves. My cobwebs are off, you know, my camp trailer. I mean, it's a really fine line because there's so many different variances of what can be done. Just like Vice Mayor Rhino, what you said, you know, with a vehicle that you don't want to be registered because you're, you know, in the military. My dad passed away a few years ago. I got his car. It sat in my driveway for 4 months. Didn't drive it and didn't do anything. Finally, I lent it to my daughter because I was waiting for my granddaughter to get her driver's license. But it sat there in my driveway, got dirty. I washed it probably once every 2 or 3 weeks, but didn't move.
This is the existing code. Okay. It's unlawful for any person to abandon, park, store, or leave, or permit abandonment, parking, storing, or leaving any licensed or unlicensed vehicle or parts thereof, which is in an abandoned, wrecked, dismantled, or inoperative condition upon the private property or public property in view. And so if it's unregistered, there's not a problem. The basic thing here is it operational? Can you start it up and drive it around the block? Okay? And things without drive lines in them, things without running gear in them, those are what we're talking about. We're not going to talk about Dad's car or whatever, which these things are operational. Put a battery in it, start it up, you're good to go. And if it's unlicensed, it's not a violation. And they're kept up. They're not a piece of junk in the driveway. There's something that's going to be eventually put back in the family use. So that's why I think this section really, with a little common sense approach, and I know our enforcement people have that, this will work rather than trying to expand it to something where it would.
So,
Mr. Warren, didn't you also say, though, that code enforcement said they could have it unregistered if it was covered with the tarp? So that's what we're trying to address, is we don't want them to be covered with the tarp as well, correct?
The idea was to make it out of public view, I think, is what the tarp business is. I don't know when that came into effect. When I read that thing earlier, the form was last changed in 15. But the tarp issue just seems to me as to come up recently in this last year, where they're taking these pieces of junk and covering them up with a tarp and telling them to get an on-off permit and you're good to go. This does not allow that, and that's my point, okay? We don't need to get to the point with tarps on things unless a person wants to protect Dad's car or whatever, then you're good to go. I don't have a problem with
But
it.
isn't that the existing code that you read?
This is the existing code.
Okay, and then you're saying that that's the existing code, but yet code enforcement is telling them they can cover it with the tarp and they're good. Correct?
They're allowing to cover up a piece of junk with a tarp and telling them they're good. They're not allowing them to cover up something that is nice and aesthetic, okay? That's what we're talking about here.
No,
You can read
because
this,
I
okay?
think what I've heard from you,
Inoperative, wrecked, abandoned, things that are damaged,
Right.
things that are in parts, you know?
but Mr. Warren, I've heard from you that you were upset because it was an inoperative vehicle, and code enforcement told them that they could cover it with a tarp and it was okay. And that's what I understood from you was the issue, was the tarping. So now you're saying that if we left it like that and they put a tarp on it, you're okay?
It's not just the tarping. Maybe I was misinterpreted or whatever. It's not just the tarping, it's the reason for the tarp. The reason the tarp was put on it was to allow the junk vehicle to stay there, okay? The junk vehicle needs to go. The nice vehicles, or the ones that are gonna be there temporarily, are okay to stay there. It's the junk ones that need to go down
I
the
know,
road.
and maybe I'm not understanding, but I thought you told me it was a junked vehicle and that they put a tarp on it, and code enforcement told them it was okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're saying that the way the code is now, that that's okay, but yet it isn't because they put a tarp on it and the junked vehicle is still there.
The tarp was put on it to allow the junk vehicle to stay.
I know.
Okay, that's not correct. That shouldn't be. You shouldn't do that.
I agree, but
Okay,
that's what we're.
That's the issue with the tarps, okay?
Right, and that's what we're trying to
If a person
find
wants
is,
to cover their RV with a tarp to protect it, there's not a problem with that, because it's not a piece of junk and it's used regularly.
okay. I'm just trying to come to some kind of understanding with you what it is that you want, because
Just
well, I understand that, but then when code enforcement comes along and says, it doesn't matter if it's running or not, and we cover it with the tarp, then you have an issue with that as well.
That's what I have an issue with.
Okay.
If it's not running, it's inoperable, it's a piece of junk, it needs to go. The tarp issue, don't put a tarp on it and say it's okay to stay there. That's a problem.
Okay, and that's what's happening.
That's
So,
what's
code, what you're saying then is code enforcement's interpretation is, once they put the tarp on, then it doesn't matter if it's inoperative or not. That's what you're saying, that code
What's
enforcement,
being enforced now.
okay.
Just like I read that little note at the beginning of the meeting tonight that says if you move it into your driveway, put a tarp on it, you're okay. But it's a wrecked vehicle. Wrecked vehicle's gotta be disposed of. You can't leave them in public view. That's what this says,
Okay.
okay?
Do you understand what he's saying?
He doesn't want the code changed, and he wants it enforced as he reads it. Absolutely. I understand exactly what he's saying, but this is a policy decision. If you want us to leave the code the way it is, we absolutely can. And we can clarify the language to ensure this is a policy decision. We're looking for your direction on the way the code's written.
Okay. Ms. Redfern?
Okay, so my first question is, this section, from everything I see, appears to be related to abandoned vehicle abatement. Is that related to the state program? And then we've added things to it? Is that what's going on?
The abandoned vehicle section has been expanded, yes. Vehicle,
Okay.
chapter 14, proposed chapter 14, but it is based on our existing code.
Okay, but what I'm talking about is if we're participating in the AVA program through the state, we can't put some of this stuff in there. It would have to be put in a different section, is what I'm saying.
That, we would have to verify with legal. I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head.
But anyway, regarding the tarps, the problem with the tarps is if somebody puts a tarp on their vehicle and they cover their license plate, code enforcement or an AVA officer can't see their license plate, and the only way you can look at it is to obtain a warrant. So that's what the problem is, why they can't go after it.
No. But what apparently, according to Mr. Warren, is happening, that if somebody has a junked vehicle in their driveway, supposedly code enforcement has told them if you cover it with a tarp, you're okay.
I can't speak to that. I know that people do it on their own every day. If you
Okay.
start taking enforcement action, they say, well, you can't see it, so I'm just gonna cover it with a tarp and there's nothing you can do. So one thing you guys might consider, I like the car cover, but you could limit it to one car cover, like, so if you've got an inoperable vehicle that is on a non-op, you only allow one, and it's gotta be parked on the driveway with a car cover fitted for that vehicle where it shows the license plate. So in the future, if it does become a problem and you can see that the tires are completely out of air and you've got debris underneath where it becomes a public nuisance, then you can either address it by AVA, the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Program, or as a public nuisance. That's just an option.
Okay.
But I would be concerned with changing the language if this is under abandoned vehicle abatements and not just public nuisance, you don't want to change the state code. You could add to it under the public nuisance sections.
We'll
Property
verify.
maintenance.
We'll verify.
Okay. Thank you. It is a nuisance?
The basis.
That's the enforcement is a nuisance.
Okay. Does anyone have any more comments on that?
I just, would it work if we established a timeline? And as something that Mr. Drossett had stated earlier, a timeline and a potential fine or fee?
Would that work?
I'm not aware that it's ever been done, but we can look into it.
Why don't you just look into some other little kinks?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Okay.
So we're clear on that?
Clear as mud. We'll do some more work. Other items?
Oh, chapter 15 on sidewalk travel, is that going to cover the street, or the sidewalk vendor, or is that going to be under the zoning ordinance?
Actually, sidewalk vending is going to be under Title V,
Okay.
Business License and Regulations.
Have we already done that?
No, that is currently scheduled for December 9th for discussion.
All right.
Anything else?
I don't believe so. I think
The
we're
only
good to
other-
go on to 19.
The only other notation, just a couple other edits that Councilmember Klein had on page 64, just a space between paragraphs B and C. That was the only thing left in Title 10. Yep.
Linda,
Yes.
waving.
Oh, yes,
There's
Mr. Warren.
another one. Page 61. 1020220C. First sentence, the very last part is persistent to section 10 or 10.
Hold on. Sorry, 61 where?
1020220, item C, very last part of the first sentence, persistent to section 10 or 10.
Yeah, just delete the or 10.
Mr. Warren? Oh, can you step up here? I can't hear you.
I had some other comments regarding to Title 10.
Okay.
Definition sections,
That's going to be,
that's kind of towards the beginning. There was a definition of what major repair included, but there was no definition of what routine maintenance was.
Right,
And
based on
that
the
was in
council's
We already,
direction.
we already
we'll
took, we already
clarify both
addressed
of
that.
those.
we discussed that
I know, but
tonight.
Yeah,
And-
based on
and-
the council's direction, we will add a definition for routine maintenance.
And down at the bottom of the definition section, there was a definition of what an operational vehicle was. And it says here that it means a vehicle that is currently capable of being propelled by its own engine. And I think it should say something, or should be defined to be something that can be lawfully operated upon any highway.
Well, what is the DMV definition of non-op?
There's no definition that I'm aware of on what an operational vehicle is in the vehicle code.
We can
Can-
look into it to see if there's other.
Okay, they'll look into it,
But I-
because we're going to have another public hearing on this anyway.
Yep.
Did you have anything else?
Yes. Are we going to address RVs, cargo vans, and things like that in the front of the property? Is that going to be done in zoning, or is that going to be done here,
Zoning.
vehicle?
Zoning is where it's proposed.
So where people can park those types of vehicles is
Correct.
going to be done in zoning? Okay.
Correct.
It won't be under 10.07, where it's the placeholder for motorhomes?
I believe it's, Tom, do you recall off the top of my head? I thought it was in 18.
I think it is an 18.
Okay.
definition of major repair the same as renovation and restoration that we're gonna be using in Title 19? What's the definition of renovation and restoration versus major repair?
That is isn't that 19?
What's that?
The renovation and repair, is that in Title 10?
We can clarify.
Okay, they'll clarify it.
Okay. On Title 10, page 22, I think it's page 22 because I'm looking at what I got off the computer. Down under F, it says all vehicles or boats in public view shall display current registration and shall be operational.
Where are you at? I'm sorry.
F.
I didn't find it on page 22.
Page 22 under, it's in that new revision where you're talking about in a fully enclosed garage.
Which chapter are you referring to?
I'm on Title 10, Vehicles and Traffic Code, and I'm on page like 22. I think in the new one, it's page 20 of 71? No. It's
Page 20?
I have page 22 of 98 when I downloaded it off the computer.
Is it 1004-210, repair of vehicle and boats
Yeah,
and
so you're-
residential?
You're referring to, that's the section we talked about earlier. Major repair.
Yes, but under F, it says all vehicles or boats in public view in a residential district shall display current registration and shall be operational. And it says proof of operation status and current registration shall be provided upon the request of a city official. And I was curious as to how that demonstration was going to take place.
Well, I would imagine if they had a complaint that when Ava or code enforcement went out there, they would ask them for that information. Would that be correct?
That's correct. And this is, again, this is a new section. This doesn't exist in our current code.
Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
Okay, we're done with Title 10.
I think we are.
Moving on to Title 19. The grand scheme of things, relatively consistent in terms of making the comments and direction from council at the discussion item for this. As noted, Councilmember Klein had a couple edits that I'll cover first. So page 24, the bottom, so section 1906-090C. There's an extra comma there. The city manager or chief of police, and it should say, or authorized designee. So just add authorized designee there in a little edit. And then page 41, 1908-110, just some capitalization of chief of police in both A and B. Similar on page 42, 1909-01, in the middle of that paragraph B, chief of police, the police is capitalized. And then page 43, the next page, 1910-02, authority, paragraph C and D, similar, chief of police, capitalized. Those were the comments from Councilmember Klein.
I wouldn't say they were comments, just,
Edits, correct.
So since you did those, I must have missed one here. Title 19, page 10, C 1, 2, and 3. For first violation by fine not to exceed $100, and then in parentheses it says 130.
So
Same with 2.
What page are you on? I'm sorry.
I'm on page 10.
Yeah, it should be 130. That's
And then the same
update.
goes for 2. For 2, it says 500, and then it says 700
Yes,
in parentheses, and 3.
1,013.
1,300. was a strikeout, and it wasn't struck out on that.
On
Okay.
on that same page, it says the second violation of the same ordinance within 1 year. But when you get a water wasting fine, I don't believe you get one, and then it kind of rolls over and you start new the next year. I think it's like forever, correct?
It's 1 year. Each section has a specific, this is the general provisions, unless it's more restrictive in that particular chapter.
So if you.
And
so
1
if you
year
got a-
from your citation or 1 calendar year?
From the citation.
What was that?
From the citation. 1 year from the citation date.
Oh, so if you,
You got it on July 14th?
yes?
It goes till July 14th of the next year.
Oh, it's not like forever?
No.
Oh, okay. Just hypothetically. Okay,
Well, that's amazing how happy that made you. Just kidding.
wow.
I couldn't resist.
Okay.
Been here standing here for a while. Other questions on 19?
Well, I brought this up last time on page 21, and it's about a commercial resident or a commercial business. I don't understand why, again, a commercial business, if they're found to be doing something against the code, that code enforcement will go and try to make contact with them, but if it's something at a private business, we don't do that. We just cite.
Private business?
I mean, a private home.
Again, if you'd like us to give us the language you'd like to change.
Well, it just doesn't seem like it's fair, and I know your comment was about not maybe being so business-friendly that we're just going to cite them right from the get-go. That was, I think, what you said the last
Yeah,
time.
that's generally why the codes are written the way they are, is that very specific reason. But again, this is a policy decision. Council would not like us to give warnings and give commercial businesses the opportunity to correct their violations. There's no reason we can't go straight to citation.
You want to leave it as it is? Or do you think it should be fair for commercial versus private citizens?
You're going to give one a warning, but not another warning.
Depends on the situation as well. I mean, garbage cans, for example, there's provisions written in there for a courtesy notice, notice of violation, and a warning. So that's for a private business, right, for private ownership.
And I think we should be business-friendly.
Okay, what do you think? Same thing?
I agree.
Okay,
So we'll leave it as is.
yep.
And then to Councilmember Condit's, on the page 31 in that item C, the
It
abandoned
was E.
vehicle. Sorry.
Yeah.
E, and those, obviously with the language that we would be looking to make changes to in the chapter in Title 10, we would
Okay.
we'd massage that to make sure that
Okay.
it's reflected.
Yeah, okay. I
Because it
appreciate
was
that.
written independently, this section wasn't revised after we
Got
made
it.
that proposed change in 10. We need council direction, so we've got that council direction. We'll try to modify that.
Totally
And
understand.
we'll reflect that change would get reflected here as well.
Thank you.
On page 30, under section 7A, it says, as defined in section 170.02.
I believe that's a government code, but we'll verify that.
Well, because up above it talks about California Government Code sections 39501 et sec. So if it
Yeah,
is.
It's not a city code, so we'll see where that reference is.
Okay. And I don't have anything else in that section, do you? Does
Nope.
anyone on the council have anything else on that? Okay, is there anyone in the audience with any questions or comments on Title 19?
Couple things. Okay. So actually, I'm actually just looking at the definitions first. Under notice and order,
Under Title 19.
yes, ma'am.
So that would be page 3 for the rest of the council to follow along.
I got
Page
page
5,
Page 5.
bottom of page 5.
Oh, okay. Oh, 5, okay, got it.
The second line, it says penalties involving serious code violations. Actually, a notice and order, depending on what you want to say is serious, it can be overgrown vegetation, it can be junk and debris in the yard, so serious actually needs to be taken out, or you wouldn't be able to use a notice and order for property maintenance issues.
We'll verify.
Oh, on page 6, definitions, so you have owner, and then a few lines down you have property owner. I'm not sure if you're trying to refer to the same thing, because you're on property owner, which is what it should be, means the record owner of real property is listed on the last equalized assessment roll through the county, and then under owner, you've got more language, but it should be the exact same as the property owner.
Well, it
Depends on the reference.
That I'd question you, because how can I be the legal property owner when I'm the executor of my dad's house and
Well,
it's
you go
not
by,
sold?
legally, a code enforcement officer has to go by what is on the county's assessor roll. So,
So you go to the county assessors, my dad's listed, he's dead. So how do you go after him?
okay, so you start with what's on the county assessor, and then you kind of go from there. So you have to that's where you have to do a title search and a whole bunch of other
We'll
things.
verify.
If it's in probate, there's a lot of research code enforcement
Okay.
officers have
It's
to
just
do.
a reference to where it's at in the document, how it's used, and whether that definition, but we'll verify. That's not hard.
Yeah, but owner, it's,
But
Exactly.
but in my case, it didn't go to probate because it was in a trust. And the trust, all it has is names listed on the trust.
We'll verify. It's not. This is
the thing is it can go to nowhere, and it's gonna be building up penalties and fines and liens.
Okay.
Because legally, the city only has to go after who's on the assessor. So it's up
Okay.
to whoever inherits the property or has control of the property to record it as such once they get control of the property.
Okay, staff will verify
Yeah.
that.
For the entire title, we need a broader definition for owner versus just property owner.
Okay.
Question under substandard properties. You've noted the Uniform Housing Code, but your primary code that you're going to use is your Health and Safety Code 17920.3, which you do note in other areas of this of Title IX. But I think you need to add that to this. They're very similar, but not exactly the same. For example, substandard properties would include mold. Uniform Housing Code does not list mold, only the Health and Safety Code lists mold. So that might be something you want to add along with the Uniform Housing Code, because it has things that the Health and Safety Code doesn't also, so.
Okay.
Okay, visual blight. Any unreasonable or unlawful condition or use of premises of a building exterior, which by reason of its appearance as, and then you have viewed at ground level from the public right-of-way or from neighboring properties. This is what's in the existing code, but it's wrong. It should be changed. You don't want to limit yourself to ground level. You have a legal right, if asked by a neighboring property, say they're the one complaining about what's in the backyard, they can invite you into their property, go up to the second story, and you can do an inspection from there. So you
Oh,
don't
but
want
it
to limit it
says-
to ground level, because that will eliminate that tool for code enforcement,
But
which
it
is
says-
legal.
But it says or from neighboring premises. I don't know that it says it has to be ground level.
It
from-
says viewed at ground level,
Or from neighboring premises.
from the public right-of-way or from neighboring premises, but,
That does exactly what you just said, from neighboring premises.
yeah. But to me, that would mean at ground level, at neighboring premises.
Well, I didn't read it that way. I read it from
But
neighboring premises.
we can verify. I don't believe that it reads that way.
I just don't want code enforcement to be limited on that by somebody
Well,
challenging it.
then it would be real easy to fix. You could just start off by saying, which by reason of its appearance from neighboring premises or viewed at ground level from the public right-of-way. I mean, just flip it around. So
Generally, the definition is, you just say visible, right?
Right, okay.
We'll verify.
Um, Okay, so okay. So page 15, collection of code enforcement fee. When I read through this section, I guess it might be just the way I read it, but it doesn't seem clear the way it's written, completely anyway, that the party, so if Mr. Klein has his cars parked on the lawn and they're not supposed to be, and a code enforcement officer goes out, does an inspection, sends a notice of violation to him regarding the code enforcement fees, it's not clear if those are going to be charged anyway because code enforcement had to do an inspection, or generally it's after you go back the second time and do a follow-up inspection, if they fail to come into compliance, that's when the code enforcement fees would kick in. But when I read this, it just isn't clear that that's the case, so I'm just curious, do you want them to be penalized up front and pay for those inspections without being given notification, or is it going to be like where it's noted in the notice of violation, if you don't come into compliance, you're going to be charged for this inspection, the cost of the notice, and this
Well,
is how much it is?
It isn't clear the city shall collect the assessed code enforcement and late fees?
Well, it's how you're giving the notification.
This
But
part's
that
for
is-
after
but-
it's been determined.
Right.
I'm sorry, what was that?
This is for when after it's been determined, then you would want this to be broader, and
What do you mean after it's been determined?
after it's been determined that there's a fee to collect, then this is how you would collect it.
Well, I guess my question is, if the property owner is going to be giving notification that they're going to be charged X amount of dollars, and they get that if they're in compliance or not when they do the follow-up inspection. I guess that's what I'm asking.
190480, where the assessment of code enforcement fees is authorized under this chapter, the Director of Code Enforcement Office shall provide the responsible person with a written notice assessing code enforcement fees.
Right, but it doesn't say prior to
Prior to,
assessing those fees.
What
I'm not following
What the city
question.
manager read prior to, and then this is post, after. This is just talking about, okay, the notice has been given,
You have
violation's
some language
been
you would like to
determined.
propose rather than, what language are you proposing? Just
Well,
call it.
it's just
send
not
me-
clear that
just send me
it
what
doesn't
you-
say
If
prior
you,
to.
you have some language, just send it to me.
Okay.
That's the easiest. If you have
Yeah.
language that you,
It's just not clear that
Just send
it's
me the
prior
language.
to,
This
and
isn't
I would
coming
hate
back-
for somebody to be charged a code enforcement fee when they haven't been given notice ahead of time that they're gonna be
you-
charged that
again,
fee if they don't
just
comply.
send me an email with the language you think was more clear.
Okey-doke. Okay,
Do you have anything else?
Oh, okay, so page 17. I guess it's I, at the very top there. It's regarding appealing a notice of violation, but you can't appeal a notice of violation. You can appeal the citation issued after a notice of violation, but a notice of violation can't be appealed. A notice and order can, but not a notice of violation.
Or take notice of,
Yeah,
it's the violation.
So I'm not following what you're asking to be changed.
okay, well, it's talking about how to appeal a notice of violation, but you can't legally appeal a notice of violation. You appeal the citation if issued.
That's the basis of the notice of violation.
Right. Right. You can appeal a notice and order, but not a notice of violation.
This section, 1905-10, is describing the procedures for notice of violation, and that I is an informational statement. I guess I'm not following the...
Well, what she's saying is you can't appeal a notice of violation. You can
Right.
only appeal a citation.
Again, this is information on...
It's on how to
So
appeal.
deleting that section, is that what you're recommending, Tom? Just deleting I?
No,
He'll work with you on the language.
Okay, that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
we can either take out notice of or make it that's probably the easiest way to do it. And add
But
instead of.
Again, this is I as a subsection of the procedures for notice of violation.
Mm-hmm. On how to appeal it. Because you're talking,
Appeal the violation, which is the substance of the notice. That's
Right.
the distinction she's making, I believe.
You can clarify that, because that's not making any sense.
Okay, anything else, Ms. Redfern?
oh, I found a typo. On 17C, it says director, and you have, oh, wait a minute.
The Director of Code Enforcement Officer?
Yeah,
Should be director or.
yeah.
I hope you're not reading it as we go along.
No,
You
I'm
have
just trying to
notes?
figure out,
Okay,
my
well, you
notes,
look like you're
what
reading
section?
it, and let's move
No.
things along.
so under the recording of the notice of violation,
Where would that be? What page?
same page, 17. So it talks about the procedures for recording.
Mm-hmm.
And then under 195040, says a copy of the recorded notice of violation shall be mailed to the responsible person and to the property owner and/or any other persons who requested copies. So oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I apologize. It came later. It came in, it showed up later, so it clarified that.
Okay, all right.
I apologize.
So are we good?
It's, okay, so it's page 18, B. So it's still, it's talking about the recording of the notice. And it says the purpose of the hearing is for the responsible person or property owner to state any reasons why the notice of violation should not be recorded. And the property owner's, the responsible person is the property owner. So like say it was issued to a tenant, the tenant is renting the property, but it's being recorded against the property that is owned by the property owner, so they would be the one that would be able to appeal a hearing ask for a hearing and all that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Mhm.
I think this discussion is really between you and the city manager and the city attorney on specific verbiage. I don't know that it really affects anything. So as in, Councilmember Klein sends things to the city manager, would you mind doing that as well? Because you know what you're talking about, and you've kind of gone page by page, and everything you say, he's going to have to check into it, so there's nothing that we're going to be able to say tonight. So is that something that you would mind doing that?
I could do that.
But no, because he's gonna tell you the same thing on everything. He's gonna have to check into it. He's not just gonna make.
Right. No, I get that.
And then it will still come back to us at the next public hearing. That's all I'm saying. If
And
you're,
is-
I mean, this is a public hearing and you have the right to speak, but it just is.
Oh, no, it makes total sense.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes
And it
sense.
allows us to have a record as well. That way we've got a paper trail to
Correct.
show where the comments came from and we can
Right.
document them.
Okay, we'll do
All
it.
right, thank you.
Toby, do you have any?
And I didn't mean to cut short your
It'll be
public
dependent
hearing,
on what
but.
they decide. It'll be dependent on what they decide next, schedule.
Okay, does anyone else have comments on that? Mr. Warren?
19?
Yes?
Correct.
Okay, I kind of talked about this a little bit before. The definition of renovation and restoration versus major repair. When someone does a renovation or a restoration on an automobile, whether it's a classic car or whatever, when they're just fixing.
Was that the same thing that Councilmember?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Warren, but we did discuss this with Mr. Wells. He's going to modify it to make it more like Title 10.
No, you're asking for the definition of renovation to be included in Title 19 as well.
Yeah, there's,
Well, that-
in the definition
That's what I was
section-
referring to as well.
So the page 31 was how the noticing process is for the abandoned vehicle.
No.
The definition that you're asking for is included in Title 10, and you're asking for that definition to be included in 19 as well. But I don't believe there's a reference in 19 to any of those items.
Well,
But it's not a problem to include a definition. It's just going to be the same definition from 10.
in Title 19, you're referring to an active state of renovation or restoration, okay?
Yeah, but if
But
it's not
there's
in
no-
19, it's defined in 10, and that definition still carries through the document. But we can add it here. It's not a problem. You said renovation, and what was the other item? Renovation and?
A restoration, okay? There's no definition of what that is versus major repair. Because
Correct.
to me, they're both the same thing.
We'll clarify.
Okay. It says here in page 32, I believe, of the revised code, under the abandoned, wrecked, or dismantled, inoperative vehicles or parts thereof, not screened from general public view or the right-of-way, except inoperative vehicles that are not abandoned are in an active state of renovation and restoration. It goes down here to 3, where it says antique and classic automobiles under any active state.
This is the section that we referred to earlier when I told the council that we would revise this whole section relative to the direction they give us earlier on the abandoned vehicles.
And that's what I was referring to.
Correct. This
Yeah,
is
so it is-
items E, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 would be revised to be reflective of proposed language that we talked about under Title 10.
Okay. All right. Then, once that's revised, it'll come back to the,
Yes, it'll be another public hearing.
okay,
We're-
thank you.
Yes, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments on that Title 19? All right, Mr. Wells?
Okey-dokey. All right, so next steps. So with a public hearing, in order for for Group 2 to be adopted, as the current schedule shows, I'll go back to that, sorry. So here's the current schedule. What was proposed at the last meeting on October 28th was this schedule. So for Group 2, which is the title we reviewed this evening, 9, 10, and 19, that would be coming back to council for a adoption of a public hearing on January 13th,
Can you change the date?
2019. My apologies. So the 2019, January 13th, if you'll recognize my older schedule there. I corrected all those dates at one point. My apologies. That's what happens when you do it late this afternoon. So the January 13th also has the public hearing for Group 3B and a discussion item for Group 4. So January 13th is a very, very busy night. So the alternative that I proposed might give us a little more time based on the comments this evening. It may be better to move that out a bit and do it with Group 3B on February 10th. And then obviously, depending on your direction on Title VI. So I look for your direction on when you'd like that to come back.
Does the council have any comment on that? You're okay with that? Councilmember DeRosa?
With the January or the February? Which one are we talking?
January or February?
February's fine.
Well, February, don't we already know the mayor's going to be gone?
I don't have all of his date. He said he should be better after January 31st.
Okay.
But it's going to be kind of hit and miss too with his schedule, so I don't know.
So I think based on all of the things that we have happening on January the 13th, I would be okay if we move something to February. Instead of having, it looks like we'd have 3 different public hearings on
Correct.
the 13th.
Well, 2 public hearings and a discussion item.
Right. And I guess if I'm not running it, it might go faster. I don't know. I don't
No
know.
comment. But yeah, we could move that to the February 10th meeting for this. It gives us a little
February 10th, we would move, what, 19?
Yeah, 9, 10, and 19 would happen at the same time. The adoption public hearing would go with Group 3B, which would be 5 and 12. So we'd have an adoption on 5 on that February 10th. We would have another public hearing that night as well.
Okay, so on January 13th, then what on the
We
muting
would have a
code?
public hearing on the 3B and a
Which
discussion on 4. 3B is titles 5 and 12.
I would be okay with that. Are you all okay with that? Councilmember DeRosa?
Yes.
Councilmember
Yes,
Condit?
if the council would like.
Yes,
With the
as long
February
as
dates.
it's in 2020.
Yes. I wish we could time travel, but we can't. So we'll stick to
Okay.
2020, and I will update those dates. My apologies.
All right, so should I close the public hearing now?
Yes.
I will close the public hearing and bring it back to staff.
It's just council direction that we've received this evening, and we'll move forward.
Is that all we need to do, or do we need to take a motion? Because no? Okay.
Because you were just taking the public input. There
All
wasn't
right.
a proposed action. It wasn't an adoption at this point in time.
Okay. There is no new business, no discussion items. Anyone on the council have an agenda item they would like to be placed on a future agenda? No. Reports. I'd just like to wish everyone a happy and hearty Thanksgiving. Councilmember Klein.
I'd also like to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. I attended the Stanislaus Farm Supply 70th anniversary dinner. It was very enlightening. I didn't realize that a lot of local people, farmers, are the ones that started it, and how big it's grown. So it was a very good event.
Good. Councilmember DeRosa?
Nothing.
Councilmember Condit?
Yes, due to the holiday and observance of Thanksgiving, I will not be having office hours this weekend, but I will reconvene office hours on December 7th between 12 and 2 p.m. here at the Community Center.
Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. As council knows, there will be a potential vacancy on the Planning Commission, and that notice has been put out in the Sirius Courier as well as on our website for applicants to apply for the Planning Commission. It closes on December 13th, so anybody can get the application on the city's website. Encourage participation in that process, and the hope would be to appoint someone for the meeting in January. So, and then, as noted, the Thanksgiving holiday, City Hall is closed on Thursday and Friday.
Mr. Hallinan? Ms. Diaz? Mr. Westbrook?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just a reminder that the Chamber of Commerce is having a holiday wine tasting event on December 6th. You can buy tickets at the Chamber. I also mentioned their 12 days of Christmas promotion. They're extending the ticket sales through that December 6th timeline. And then just a reminder that Christmas Tree Lane is December 7th.
Oh, thank you, yes. Chief Collins?
To update you, we swore in a new officer last week. He is starting his training program, and within the last 2 weeks, we hired our 10th full-time dispatcher.
Great.
Moving right along. We are one away from being fully staffed on patrol at the patrol officer level.
Good. Lieutenant Crane? Chief Wise? Nothing. Mr. Damas? Nothing. All right, seeing, well, I guess we have nothing else to discuss. So we will adjourn the meeting until the next meeting of Monday, December the 9th at 6 p.m.